Nobody asked me before they loaded the clutch into hold 4. Nobody asked me anything on the ash cradle. I was 13, a refugee off a colony that didn't exist anymore. And the only thing I owned that wasn't rationed was a name and a life vest 2 sizes too big. So when Provost Aldous Cade's salvage crew hauled a crate of stone-colored eggs out of a drowned derelict and stacked them next to the water reclaimers, I didn't think it was my business. I was just the kid who slept on the crates because the bunks were full. 3 nights later, something in that crate started ticking. Not machinery, breathing. I was the only one awake. Hold 4 ran the graveyard cycle after lights out. Half the reclaimer pumps shut down, the rest humming low enough that you could hear your own pulse in your ears. And that's the only reason I heard it at all. I peeled back the tarp expecting rot, or rats, or nothing. Instead, I found 3 hatchlings the size of dogs, plated in wet gray-green scale, still slick with whatever fluid the shell had held them in, jaws already too big for their heads, eyes open and locked on me like I was the only fixed point in the room. I should have sealed the crate and called it in. Refugees don't get intake manuals. They get a bunk number, a ration card, and a lot of silence about what happens when the ration runs out. So instead, I sat down on the cold deck plating and didn't move, because moving felt like the wrong thing to do around something that looked at you like that. One of them, smaller than the other 2, with a notch missing from its brow ridge like it had been chipped straight out of the shell, climbed down over the crate lip, crossed the deck without any hurry, and walked straight into my lap. It went still there, heavy and warm, its heartbeat coming through its plates faster than mine. By morning, all 3 were sleeping against my legs, and I had named them without deciding to: Notch, Slate, Rill. Cade found us at first light. He was ex-military, still wore the posture, still expected the ship to salute him even though the ship was 6,000 starving people who hadn't seen a real coastline in 11 months. He took one look at the hatchlings curled around a refugee kid and said the word I'd learned to hate: unlisted, biohazard, cargo to be logged, contained, and, if the containment specs didn't clear, vented. "They're not hurting anyone," I said. "They're not on a manifest," he said. "That makes them nothing. Nothing gets fed, boy, and nothing gets carried." He posted a seal on hold 4 that night. I broke it every night after, brought them fish paste and water ration I skipped to afford, and told nobody. The crew that did know, the deckhands, the reclaimer techs, an old woman named Priska who ran the mess, didn't tell Cade either. They'd seen what 6,000 people looked like with nothing left to hope for. A kid with 3 sleeping monsters wrapped around him was the first thing on that ship that looked like hope in a long time, and they weren't about to hand that back to a man with a clipboard. Priska started slipping me extra ration without being asked, folded into a cloth so the shift supervisor wouldn't notice the shape of it. "Feed the little terrors," she'd say, like they were somebody's grandkids and not something that could take her hand off at the wrist. I never saw her flinch around them, not even the night Rill got underfoot and nearly took the mess hall door off its hinges, reaching for a dropped tray. She just laughed and said the ship finally had a security detail worth the air it breathed. The hatchlings grew like something was rushing them, like whatever clock had been keeping them dormant in that derelict for however many years had decided to make up the difference all at once. Within 3 weeks, Notch was the size of a cargo mule, plates darkening from wet gray to a deep iron green, claws long enough to punch through bulkhead if she wanted to. She never wanted to. She'd press her skull into my palm and hold dead still until I told her easy. 1 word, no more. And she'd exhale through both nostrils like the word itself was the only medicine she needed. Slate learned to sit at the edge of a doorway and wait, patient as a stone, until I walked through first. Rill never stopped being the loud one, chewed through 2 ration crates and a coil of signal cable before I figured out what to keep out of her reach. But she was the first to press against my side whenever the ship's hull groaned from cold current stress, like she'd decided that was her job before anyone told her what her job was. I didn't train them. I never taught them a single trick. I just didn't flinch, and somewhere in that, they decided I was the one fixed thing worth answering to, on a ship full of people still deciding whether they had anything left worth protecting. Cade caught us in the open corridor on day 26. He had 4 security officers in full riot plate behind him, stun lances up, faceplates down. He'd had enough of a seal he couldn't enforce. "Step aside," he told me. "This ends today." I didn't have plate. I didn't have a weapon. I had the vest, the same one I'd worn since the evacuation, half a size too small now, and 3 creatures who'd decided, for reasons no report would ever capture, that I was theirs to answer to. I said, "Stay close," because that's what I always said to them in a crowd. I didn't mean it as a command to anyone but them. All 3 came off the deck at once and formed up at my back, not snarling, not lunging, just present, immovable. 3 sets of eyes fixed past me at 4 armored men, who suddenly looked very aware of how thin their plate was. Cade's people didn't fire. They didn't move at all. One of them actually stepped backward. Cade held his ground a beat longer than his own officers did, which is the only credit I'll give him. Then the ship's alarms went off, and none of us had to decide anything else that day. The hollow current takes ships that stray off the charted lane, a drowned debris field left over from a war 3 generations dead, and something ancient still hunts through the wreckage there. We'd strayed. The thing that found us was old enough that the sensor crews didn't have a name for it. The log afterward just called it the grave maw, because that's what it left behind. It came up through the convoy's flank in a wall of black water and torn hull plate, and it went for the slowest ship in the line, a transport packed with people too old or too young to fight their way to an escape pod in time. I felt Notch go rigid against my shoulder before I heard the alarm finish its first cycle. She was through the corridor before I'd stood all the way up, Slate and Rill a half length behind her, and I ran after them because there was nothing else in me that knew how to do anything different. By the time I reached the breach in Hold 4's outer wall, all 3 of them were already in the water, and what I saw in the next 4 minutes is the only part of this I still don't have clean words for. They didn't fight it like animals cornered. They fought it like something that had done this before, in some older ocean, for some older reason. Notch took the thing's foreclaw across her flank and didn't so much as flinch out of position. Rill went for the eyes. Slate, barely 8 weeks out of an egg, put his whole body between the Gravemaw's jaws and the transport's hull, and held there until the current turned red, and the thing finally broke off and sank back into the dark it came from. They came back to me soaked, scored with wounds that would scar white against the green, and they folded down around my legs on the open deck in front of the entire evacuated crew of that transport, in front of Cade, who'd come up top with his officers still holding stun lances they hadn't fired once. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Priska, of all people, said it first. "Would you look at that? The waking tide." The name stuck before the shift was even over, what the whole fleet started calling that hour, and then the 3 of them, and eventually, without anyone voting on it, the boy who'd fed them fish paste in a locked hold. Cade didn't apologize. Men like him don't, but he was the one who signed the manifest 3 days later. Thren, adopted, Ash Cradle Registry, handler, Milo Thane, in front of the same officers who'd watched him back down in that corridor. That was apology enough for 6,000 people who needed something to believe in more than they needed his pride intact. I still sleep on crates in Hold 4. I just don't sleep alone anymore. Notch takes the corner nearest the door, the way she always has, like she's still deciding the room is safe before she'll let herself rest. Some nights I put my hand on her skull and say the only word she's ever needed from me, and she goes still, and somewhere out past the hull the rest of the convoy keeps moving toward whatever's left for us to find. I didn't ask for any of this. I just didn't move when something needed somewhere to land.